My wife drained our account and ran off with her fitness coach. She didn't know I'd been preparing for her exit since year 6. They say betrayal hits hardest when it comes from the one you built your world with. But what happens when the quiet one, the provider, the steady one, was never blind? When he saw it coming years ago and chose silence not out of weakness but preparation. This isn't the story of a man falling apart. It's the story of how he let it all fall, exactly the way he planned. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when the message came in. I'm not coming back. I've met someone better. Your things are in storage. No greeting, no explanation, just 2 sentences and a screenshot. $118,000, 0 cents, had been moved from our joint savings to an account I'd never seen before. I stared at the screen for a moment. It was 11:42 p.m. on a Thursday. The kitchen was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator, and outside the window, downtown Des Moines looked exactly as it always did. Streetlights flickering, someone dragging out a trash bin, a late-night jogger in reflective gear. Dana was supposed to be in Palm Springs with her yoga friends on day 4 of what she called a much-needed girls' trip. I placed the phone down gently beside my mug, took a long breath, and finished the coffee. It wasn't even hot anymore. 15 years of marriage ended by text message. Some part of me knew this was coming. The weekends away that kept stretching into Mondays. The new clothes I never saw her wear around me. The phone calls that dropped into silence the second I entered a room. I noticed all of it. Noticing things is what I do. I'm a forensic accountant. I spent my days following the breadcrumbs other people leave behind, unraveling embezzlement schemes, catching creative bookkeeping tricks, tracking movement through numbers most people glance past. But in my own home, I said nothing. Maybe that was my first mistake. Or maybe it was marrying someone who never respected what I did, who once said, while sipping wine at a client dinner, that my job was just boring spreadsheets and old people's taxes. I stood up and walked over to my laptop, not the one Dana knew. The other one, the one I kept locked in a drawer in my office. I logged in and opened a private email account. Again, one Dana never knew existed. 3 security alerts blinked at the top of my inbox. Someone had tried to reset the passwords on 3 different bank accounts. Dana didn't just leave, she came prepared. I had to give her credit, she was thorough. That was almost admirable. I stared at the alerts a moment longer, then opened my phone again. I typed 2 words, good luck. Then I pressed call. My brother Jason picked up on the second ring. Hey, he said, a little groggy. It's time, I told him. He didn't ask what I meant. Are you sure? Yes, I said. She made her move. We didn't say goodbye. We didn't need to. I looked over at the framed wedding photo still hanging on the wall. We were younger then, smiling like we had just solved something together. That photo had survived 3 moves, 1 flood, and the time I accidentally dropped it down a stairwell while packing. I should have noticed that it was the only picture of us left in the condo. Everything else had slowly disappeared, photo albums stored away, frames missing from shelves, gifts from our travels quietly vanishing. I turned off the lights and stood in the darkness for a long time. My name is Leonard Kessler. I'm 54 years old. I run my own forensic accounting practice, mostly servicing mid-sized firms and high-net-worth individuals with messy records. I've testified in court. I'd helped the IRS identify multi-million-dollar fraud rings, but none of that mattered when it came to my own marriage, because at home I wasn't Leonard the expert. I was Leonard the predictable. Leonard who always came home at 6. Leonard who kept the bills paid, the taxes filed, and the fridge full. I met Dana at an alumni mixer at the University of Iowa. She was vibrant, confident, and magnetic in a way that filled rooms. I was divorced, 38, and focused on building something of my own. She said she liked that I was steady. That I wasn't a roller coaster. I should have known then that what she meant was boring. But I ignored it, just like I ignored the way she scoffed at spreadsheets or said she didn't need to understand the details as long as there was enough to live well. We got married after a year. I used my savings to help her open her yoga studio, and when she wanted a bigger house, I agreed. When she wanted luxury cars and wellness retreats in Bali, I signed the checks. I was happy to give, to build a life she felt proud of. My father once said something while we were fixing his deck. He paused with a hammer in his hand and said, "Son, I notice your wife spends a lot of your money. Just make sure she values what you do to earn it." I laughed it off. But I never forgot it. And 6 years into our marriage, I started quietly shifting things. Nothing shady, just smart. 2 limited liability companies, a few discrete trusts, offshore accounts tied to my international clients. I told Dana about the joint accounts. She never asked about the rest. Maybe she thought I was too boring to have secrets. But boring men pay attention, boring men make plans, and boring men survive. By the time I closed the laptop, the apartment felt colder, like the silence had settled in deeper now that the last illusion was gone. I walked into the study and opened the small safe hidden behind a framed diploma. Another one of those touches Dana used to call paranoid. Inside were printed documents, USB drives, a prepaid phone, and a black leather notebook with initials embossed in silver, LK. It was my contingency binder, something Jason and I had created years ago, more as a mental exercise than a real necessity. Back then, we joked about it. What if someone tried to drain my accounts? What if a client turned hostile or an audit went wrong? What if a spouse got ambitious? I remember writing that word in ink. Ambitious. Never unfaithful, never vindictive, just ambitious. I placed the binder on the kitchen counter, sat down, and opened it. Tab 1, Banking Assets. Tab 2, Protective Filings. Tab 3, Passwords, Backups, Off-Grid Contacts. I followed the checklist like muscle memory, because that's what it was now. Years of preparation distilled into 27 pages. I powered on the prepaid phone, entered the SIM code, and sent one text, initiate. Within seconds, a reply came through from Jason, in motion. That was all I needed. I booted up my secure financial dashboard, a system I'd built myself, designed originally for client audits, now tailored to track and protect my own network. I flagged the $118,000 0 cents transfer for investigation and forwarded the logs to a banking contact I trusted. Someone who owed me a favor from a case we cracked 2 years ago involving a shell company and fake payroll in Omaha. Then, I opened our joint account and initiated a full freeze. I canceled every credit card connected to Dana, flagged her social security number for fraud alerts, and sent an automatic update to my lawyer's secure Dropbox. At 12:11 a.m., I filed the paperwork to begin divorce proceedings under the clause of financial misconduct. It didn't feel like revenge, it felt like alignment. Like things were finally snapping into place. I took a break only to refill my coffee. Same mug, same quiet kitchen. But everything had changed. For a moment, I stared out the window and thought of Dana packing my clothes, boxing up my memories while I went about my day, unaware. Or maybe I wasn't unaware. Maybe I just didn't want to know. There's a kind of violence in premeditated betrayal. Not the explosion, but the silence before it. The long, cold calculation of someone deciding that your life is theirs to discard. I dialed my mother. She answered on the second ring. "Leonard?" "Dana's gone," I said simply. "She took the money. She moved out while I was drinking coffee." My mother didn't say anything right away. Then, softly, "I'm sorry, son. But I can't say I'm surprised. Neither can I." "What are you going to do?" I looked at the binder, then the laptop, then back out into the night. "What I've been preparing to do for years," I said. "I'm going to protect what's mine." After the call, I stood in the hallway and looked around our condo. No, her condo now. The minimalist artwork, the scented candles, the stack of yoga magazines on the coffee table. How many things had I paid for in this space that no longer felt like home? A dozen times I'd let things go to avoid conflict. Dana had always made it seem like voicing concern meant I was controlling or insecure. But control wasn't what I needed, clarity was. And finally, I had it. She thought she'd taken everything, but what she didn't realize was that boring men don't just plan for retirement. We plan for exits. We plan for betrayal. We plan for people who believe we're too steady to ever strike back. I checked the time, 12:47 a.m. The night was just beginning, and so was the audit of a lifetime. I met Dana at an alumni networking event at the University of Iowa, one of those awkward wine and cheese nights where everyone pretended they weren't measuring each other's success. I was 38, recently divorced from a short-lived marriage that ended with more sighs than shouting, and focused entirely on building my forensic accounting firm. Dana was 34, magnetic in a way that felt like stepping into sunlight after years of gray. She laughed easily, spoke quickly, and when she listened, it was with a tilt of her head that made you feel like your words mattered. She said I was different, that I was calm in a world full of noise. She said she liked that I had a grown man's energy. I didn't know what that meant, but I took it as a compliment. Our first date was dinner at a place I couldn't really afford at the time. She ordered wine by the bottle, not the glass, and when the check came, she didn't even glance at it. That should have been a flag, not a red one, but a pale yellow, Easy to miss if you're already leaning toward someone. We moved fast. Within 6 months, we were talking about living together. By 9, we were engaged. I proposed on a quiet bridge just outside Cedar Rapids, and she cried in a way that made me believe we were building something rare. We got married in a fall ceremony, surrounded by golden trees and rented elegance. I paid for all of it, of course. My parents contributed what they could, but Dana wanted a certain kind of wedding, the kind with calligraphed menus and string quartets. And I wanted her to have it. That was the pattern we settled into. She wanted, I provided. When she mentioned wanting to start her own yoga studio, I offered my entire savings. She said it was the most romantic thing anyone had ever done for her. I handled the lease, the startup costs, the marketing firm that helped her pick a name. She wanted to call it eunoia, the Greek word for beautiful thinking. She didn't know how to pronounce it at first. I taught her. When the studio took off, she was radiant, booking retreats, hiring staff, becoming a minor wellness celebrity on social media. I was proud of her. But every time I tried to explain what I did, how I caught a CFO cooking the books, or how a client almost lost $400, 0 cents, K, to internal theft, she'd smile, nod, and say, "That sounds complicated. I'm just glad you love it." She didn't mean it unkindly. Dana never wanted to understand, and for a while that was okay. I told myself not every couple needed to share the same passions. But over time, the gap widened. I started to feel like a utility, dependable, unremarkable, always on. She called me her rock to friends. What she meant was background. She picked the house, I signed the check. She chose the cars, first a Lexus, then a BMW. Necrobio. I made sure the insurance was paid. She picked vacation spots based on what looked best on Instagram. I booked the flights and checked us in. I can still remember sitting on the balcony of a resort in Tulum, watching her pose for sunset shots while I answered emails from a client under federal audit. She didn't ask why I worked so much. She just assumed I wanted to. But it wasn't work I was clinging to. It was relevance. It was proof that I mattered somewhere, even if not in my own home. My father saw it early. He came over one weekend to help fix the deck. Dana was out at a retreat, and while we hammered and measured, he said, "I noticed Dana spends a lot of your money." I laughed it off. "She's building her dream," I told him. He paused, looking out toward the yard. "Just make sure she values what you do to earn it." I didn't want to admit how much that line stuck with me. I didn't want to admit that I had started to feel more like her financier than her partner. But I also didn't want to confront the implications of that, so I did what I always did, kept things running, quietly, efficiently. Until one night, 6 years into the marriage, I couldn't sleep. I got out of bed, walked into my office, and opened a blank document. At the top, I wrote, "Contingency plan." I didn't tell Jason right away. I didn't tell anyone. I just started building something that gave me back a sense of agency. I set up 2 LLCs under different names. I worked with a trust attorney to protect my retirement assets. I invested in crypto early, before the headlines. I created backups, firewalls, redundancies. Not because I thought she'd leave, but because some part of me sensed she might, one day, decide she'd outgrown me. People think betrayal is sudden, that it arrives like a car crash or a lightning bolt. But most of the time, it drips in slowly. Missed birthdays, canceled dinners, the way she started traveling with her wellness group more and inviting me less. "You wouldn't enjoy it," she'd say breezily. "It's all juice cleanses and yoga talk." Last Christmas, she forgot my birthday. I reminded her the next day and she gasped, swore she'd been overwhelmed with the studio expansion, then handed me a watch in a blue box. It was expensive. Probably the most expensive gift she'd ever given me. But I remember holding it in my hands and feeling nothing. No warmth, no surprise, just confirmation. That night, I went back to the document on my computer and finalized the last pieces of the plan, because love, when it loses respect, turns into performance, and I had grown tired of pretending. I used to tell myself that I was just overthinking it, that everyone drifts a little after a decade of marriage, that not every trip needed to include both of us, that yoga retreats in Sedona or week-long sound bath immersions in Costa Rica were just part of Dana's brand. I wanted to believe that the distance between us was circumstantial, not deliberate. But belief doesn't hold up against pattern, not when you've spent your life dissecting them. The signs weren't just there, they were cataloged, stamped, and filed like a ledger waiting to be balanced. First, it was the passwords. Dana used to leave her phone on the kitchen counter, screen up, notifications popping like champagne bubbles. Then one day, she added facial recognition, and started carrying it with her, even into the shower. "It's just habit," she said when I asked. "I keep getting spam calls." Then it was the mail. Packages began arriving with boutique fitness gear, vitamins I'd never heard of, and once, a bottle of cologne. She said it was a client gift. I nodded. Then came the gaps in stories, timelines that didn't line up, names that shifted, friends I'd never met but who seemed to know everything about me. I remember one evening, standing in the kitchen while she talked on speakerphone to someone named Lexi, her voice light, flirtatious in a way that used to be mine. The second I stepped in, she ended the call mid-sentence. "That was Lexi," she said quickly, grabbing a spoon. "We were talking about branding." I didn't ask anything. I just watched the way her hand trembled slightly as she stirred the soup. Dana wasn't good at lying. She was just confident I wouldn't call her on it. That was her real talent, making you feel like confronting the truth would ruin the mood, disrupt the vibe, make you the problem. But I don't live on vibes. I live on facts. And slowly the facts started forming a pattern. I began saving screenshots of social media posts where she tagged fitness accounts I didn't recognize, of expense statements that didn't match our shared itinerary. I logged hotel receipts that appeared on our card even when I was home and she was visiting her cousin. I didn't confront her, not yet. I needed the full picture, not for vengeance, for closure. Because you can't argue with what you already know, but you can prepare for the moment it stops pretending. And when that moment arrived, when Dana's text landed like a slap through glass, I didn't call her, I didn't beg. I opened the drawer and pulled out the binder. I initiated everything I'd spent years assembling. Because I didn't just build protections, I built truth. I knew where every dollar had gone, every transfer, every signature, including the ones she thought I wouldn't notice. I scanned through the recent activity on our joint accounts and saw the month-long trail of small withdrawals. $300, 0 cents here, $1, 20 cents there, each labeled wellness event or vendor refund, all routed to an account under her name at a different bank. Death by 1,000 cuts. She'd been bleeding the foundation slowly, quietly, like a whisper of betrayal. The $118, 0 cents wasn't a sudden strike. It was the finale, the curtain drop. And now the audit was underway. That night, I sat with my laptop open, cross-referencing records from 3 institutions, matching timestamps with location data, overlaying it with Dana's Instagram activity. The digital paper trail was loud if you knew how to listen. A weekend retreat that coincided with a luxury hotel booking in Scottsdale, paid for by our account, tagged by Dana's yoga circle, featuring a man in the background of more than one selfie. He had a distinct tattoo on his left arm. I zoomed in, enhanced the image, and searched public databases. It took 10 minutes to find him. Trey Harmon, founder of Harmon Fitness, fitness influencer, multiple LLCs under his name, gym gear sponsor, and 3 lawsuits from past investors. The same Trey she'd tagged 2 weeks ago with the caption, "Working on something big." I stared at the screen, the glow of it casting shadows across the wall. 15 years of marriage and she couldn't even pick someone with a clean balance sheet. I should have felt anger. Instead, I felt focus, like something inside me had clicked into place, like the case file had finally stopped shifting and revealed the pattern underneath. I opened a new folder on my laptop and labeled it Exit Audit Dana B, because from here on out, that's what this was. Not heartbreak, not vengeance, not even loss. It was documentation. It was evidence. And it was time to close the books. The morning after Dana's message, I woke up at 5:17 a.m. without an alarm. No dreams, no hesitation, just a quiet, clinical clarity that spread across my chest like armor. Some people fall apart when the life they built collapses overnight. Some beg, bargain, break down. I got up, made coffee, and turned on the system. Not the bank system, mine. I designed it over a decade ago, first as a way to track client assets in high-stakes audits, then slowly adapted it to run my personal life like a closed-loop network. Every account, every investment, every liability nested inside a real-time dashboard with encrypted backups and tripwire alerts. At 5:42 a.m., I initiated Protocol C. The codename Jason and I had jokingly assigned to catastrophic betrayal. At the time, it had felt like overkill. Now, it felt overdue. The system responded instantly. First, I froze all joint accounts. Checking, savings, credit, line of credit, the travel fund Dana insisted we open but rarely contributed to. Then I triggered a fraud alert on the $118,000 0 cents transfer. I attached time-stamped login data, IP logs, and device fingerprints, data the bank couldn't ignore. I didn't need to accuse her, I just needed to prove she had acted without authorization. Next, I flagged her social security number across my institution's internal fraud watch list and sent a silent alert to a senior contact at the bank. Someone I'd helped during a forensic audit 2 years ago, back when a regional CFO tried to cook expense reports during a merger. I knew exactly what language to use. Pattern consistent with internal misappropriation. Subject relationship terminated, seeking expedited reversal pending legal action. Then I uploaded a full data packet to my attorney's secure drive and attached a note. Initiate divorce proceedings today. Grounds. Financial misconduct. Include evidence from attached file. I moved to the next item, property locks. Using the home automation panel, another thing Dana once laughed at me for installing, I disabled her access codes and reset the biometric scanner. I ordered a lock change for the office and the post office box I used for sensitive mail. At 6:18 a.m., I pulled out the second prepaid phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in 2 years. "Leonard?" The voice answered groggily. "It's time," I said again. She made her move, I made mine. There was a pause. "Copy that," Jason said. "You want full surveillance? Only if she pushes. Understood. What's your move now?" "Storage unit," I replied. "She says my things are there. You want me to go with?" "No, I need to see it alone." At 7:03 a.m., I pulled into the lot. Industrial Anonymous, rows of metal roll-ups stacked like sealed secrets. She had sent the code in her text, thinking she was being generous. "I didn't throw your stuff out," she'd written. "I'm not heartless." I entered the digits and opened the door. 2 boxes sat near the back wall. That was it. Inside were some clothes, a pair of running shoes, my laptop bag, and the watch she gave me last Christmas. The one I never wore. I looked around for the rest. Photo albums, my father's medals, the first edition books I collected, the signed ball from my college baseball coach. Nothing. As if I'd never existed in our shared life. She hadn't just left me. She had erased me. And that was when something shifted. Not rage, not grief, something colder, more surgical. This wasn't about marriage anymore. It was about identity, about someone deciding they could redraw the map of my life and cut me out entirely. I closed the unit, locked it again, and walked back to my car. I didn't drive home. I wasn't sure I even had one anymore. Instead, I pulled into a quiet coffee shop I used to visit before Dana decided it was too basic. I ordered black coffee, no cream, no sugar, and sat near the back. I opened my laptop and began the second phase, cross-checking all accounts Dana had ever touched, tracking aliases, secondary email addresses, payment platforms. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for truth. Forensics doesn't lie, numbers don't spin stories, they document them. And what I saw confirmed what I'd suspected. She hadn't decided this overnight. She'd been planning her exit for months, maybe longer. Quiet withdrawals. Micro-transfers, labeled as vendor refunds. Payments routed to accounts I didn't recognize. And then, something else. A pattern. A name. Harmon. Trey Harmon. Her, someone better? Suddenly, the next steps were clear. This wasn't just emotional fallout, this was a case. And I knew exactly how to close it. The name kept showing up like a watermark I hadn't noticed before. Subtle, persistent, embedded in the background of Dana's life. Harmon. Not just in emails or payment platforms, but in the metadata of photos she posted, the tagged gym events, the nutrition supplement launches she raved about on Instagram. I'd scrolled past him a dozen times without registering it. Square jaw, overly white teeth, sleeveless hoodies, and affirmations like, "Dominate every hour." Pasted over videos of him slamming ropes and shouting into mirrors, I opened my browser and typed, Trey Harmon plus LLC. 4 results came up immediately. Harmon Fitness LLC, Harmon Athletics, Harmon Fuel, a Delaware-registered umbrella company under his name. I pulled up the business credit data using investigator portals licensed to forensic professionals. What I saw didn't surprise me. Trey Harmon was underwater. 3 business credit cards, maxed, a high-interest equipment loan, late fees stacked like bricks. The gym lease had gone unpaid for 2 months before someone wired in a last-minute payment from a joint account at First Community Bank, an account that had my name on the other half. Dana. She hadn't just left me for Trey. She'd been funding him. At first it was minor, $800, 0 cents for an equipment order, $1.50 labeled marketing. Then $4.20 marked retreat prep, but it escalated. I found a $12, 0 cents wire transfer from one of our joint savings accounts, split into 2 payments, both sent to Harmon Fuel, the supplement side hustle Trey had been hyping online but had no FDA approvals for. I felt the click again, that cold, final click when the last puzzle piece snaps into place. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and said it aloud. She's been investing in him. With my money. I opened the images from her social media again. Photos from Arizona, from Miami, from Denver. Trey was always just out of frame. A hand on her shoulder, a reflection in the glass, a shape in the mirror at the end of the studio hallway. He was everywhere, just invisible enough for deniability, but the data told the truth. She had co-signed on a car loan for him 2 months before she left me. The contract listed her as the primary guarantor. The address on the form? Ours. She had used my legal residence to give Trey better financing terms. My name wasn't on the paperwork, but my assets had been used as implied backing. She knew exactly what she was doing. I closed the documents, took a slow breath, and opened a secure message to Jason. Got the name, Trey Harmon. Pull everything. 3 minutes later, he responded. On it. I sat back and stared at the wall of the coffee shop. Couples were laughing over breakfast wraps. A kid spilled his orange juice and cried until his father wiped it up and kissed his forehead. The world was still spinning, but inside me something had stilled. I wasn't spiraling, I wasn't unraveling, I was preparing. The rules had changed, and I wasn't fighting to win her back. I was documenting to make sure she never took anything else. I checked the time, 9:12. A yummy Monday was coming. And with it, the beginning of something they wouldn't see coming. Not because I was cruel, but because I was precise. They thought I was just an accountant. They forgot I was a forensic one. Monday morning came dressed in the usual disguise. Emails, phone buzzes, the sound of Valerie tapping her keyboard outside my office. I walked in precisely at 8:05 a.m., wearing the same navy suit I always wore when I needed to be taken seriously without looking like I was trying. Valerie looked up from her screen, surprised. Leonard, I thought you'd be taking a few days off. Did Dana call? I asked, not even pretending to ease into it. Her eyes widened slightly. She called here 3 times Friday, sounded upset, said there was some kind of mix-up with the bank. I nodded once. If she calls again, direct her to my attorney. She has the number. I didn't wait for a reply. I just walked into my office, closed the door, and logged into the dashboard. Everything was still in place. Assets locked, alerts active, joint accounts frozen, fraud notifications progressing through the chain. The reversal on the $118,000 0 cents was flagged as pending. My lawyer had already filed the paperwork Friday afternoon, and over the weekend I'd received the confirmation that Dana had attempted, unsuccessfully, to access 3 accounts I'd restricted. She was panicking. Good. That meant she still didn't understand how far ahead I'd been playing. At 9:14 a.m., the receptionist buzzed. Your wife is here. She's insistent. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and walked to the lobby. Dana was standing in front of the reception desk, wearing yoga gear that probably cost more than my mortgage payment. Hair tied perfectly, face just flushed enough to look human but not too much to look unprepared. She smiled when she saw me, that same practiced, radiant smile she used at investor mixers and family dinners, the one that said, "You love me even when you're mad." "Leonard," she said, voice bright and too loud, "there's been a huge misunderstanding with the bank. I think they froze everything by accident." I didn't blink. "Not a misunderstanding." I kept my voice low, calm, surgical. "You transferred money without authorization. The bank flagged it as potential fraud." Her smile faltered just for a second. "It was our joint account," she said, still trying to play the part. "I'm your wife. You're my soon-to-be ex-wife," I corrected, "who drained our savings while informing me you'd moved out and met someone better. That qualifies as financial misconduct." Her voice dropped to a whisper, low and sharp. "You cannot do this to me." "I'm not doing anything to you," I said. "I'm protecting myself from theft." "I've already put deposits down on a new place," she hissed. "I've made commitments to Trey." "Yes," I said. "I know all about those commitments." She blinked, and for the first time her face paled. "You're investigating me?" "No," I said flatly. "I'm documenting fraud." She stepped closer, dropped the act entirely. I'll fight this, Leonard. You think you're clever, but I know people. I have lawyers. I deserve half of everything. You deserve half of what's in the accounts you know about, I said evenly. But you seem to be under the impression that's all there is. Her breath caught. What are you talking about? You'll find out, I said, in discovery. I turned without another word and walked back to my office. Her voice didn't follow me this time, but the silence did, and it said more than she ever had. By mid-afternoon, the quiet had settled in again, the kind that comes after a storm leaves but before the air clears. I returned to my desk and sifted through flagged emails, invoices, and legal notices, normal noise for a Monday. Then, at 2:37 p.m., it arrived. The subject line was polite. Legal counsel requesting immediate financial disclosure. The body was not. Dana's newly hired attorney had sent an aggressive letter demanding full access to all of my personal and business financial records. The tone was theatrical. Accusatory phrases like intentional concealment, improper withholding of marital assets, and the classic, "Our client is prepared to expose irregularities in Mr. Kessler's accounting practice if cooperation is not forthcoming." It was amateurish, a bluff with no teeth. They were hoping I'd panic or flinch, or maybe even respond emotionally. I didn't. I read it once, calmly, then opened a new email to my attorney. I attached the letter, typed a single sentence in the body, and hit send. Proceed as planned. That was it. I didn't need a rebuttal. I didn't need to dignify the threat with a rebuttal paragraph or tone-polished counterattack. Because this wasn't a courtroom drama. It was arithmetic. And arithmetic doesn't care how loud you yell. By 3:12 p.m., Valerie knocked gently on my door. "You're getting a lot of messages," she said cautiously. "From who? Mutual friends, Facebook, texts, even someone from Dana's old yoga group. They're asking why you're being controlling?" I nodded once, unsurprised. "She's rallying people to her side," I said, more to myself than to Valerie, "and no one asked where she's been for the last week." Valerie hesitated. "Not from what I saw." "No one asked who she was with?" "No." "And the $118,000, 0 cents? Or they don't seem to know." No, of course they didn't. Because Dana knew how to manage narratives, smile through scandal, turn fraud into misunderstanding, paint self-protection as hostility. But I didn't bother responding to any of the messages. I didn't explain. I didn't post a counterstory. I went to the gym. Not Dana's studio, not Trey's flashy influencer space. I went to the old community center where I'd lifted weights for years. No branding, no Instagram tags, just iron and breath and repetition. I stayed until my arms shook. Then I showered, drove back to my hotel, and reviewed the tracker logs. Dana had tried to access our frozen accounts again, 6 times since noon. She still didn't understand. This wasn't a phase. This wasn't leverage. This was done. The trap was closing, but not around me. The next morning, I drove to Jason's place, a quiet, single-level home tucked into a cul-de-sac lined with trees that had started to yellow for fall. His dog barked once as I knocked. He opened the door in sweats and a Henley, coffee already in hand. "You look like you haven't slept," he said. "I haven't." "Good. Let's work." We moved to his office. More server racks than furniture, 3 monitors glowing with layered code and security interfaces. Jason worked digital security like I worked numbers, obsessively, quietly, and years ahead of most people. "I need everything you can find on Harmon Fitness LLC, I told him. "Loans, leases, credit apps, public records only." "Of course," he said, already typing. "We're just connecting publicly available dots faster than they expected." It didn't take long. The first wave of data showed what I'd already suspected. Trey Harmon's business wasn't just overextended, it was collapsing in real time. His public image was polished, sponsored gymwear, vitamin endorsements, TikTok challenges, but behind the curtain was a string of failed expansion attempts. 3 major credit cards, Jason said, scrolling. All maxed. Gym equipment lease, 3 months overdue. "Oh, look at this." He opened a PDF, small business loan filed 4 months ago, $175,000, 0 cents, secured with equipment, collateralized. "That tracks," I said, "probably for the new studio space." "Right, but here's the kicker." Jason highlighted a line halfway down the page. "Look who co-signed." I leaned closer. There it was in pixel-perfect clarity. Dana's signature. "She signed before she left you," Jason said softly. "Loan date is 2 months before that text." My stomach clenched, but I didn't let it show. "Is that her legal name on the loan?" "Yep. And get this, There's a clause here, joint spousal responsibility acknowledged for collateralized asset guarantee. I stared at the screen. They used our marital status to secure better loan terms. Exactly. Her name, your assets. They didn't list you officially, but the lender believed you were behind it. Married applicants almost always get preferential rates. So she put me on the hook. Quietly. Illegally. And not just for that, Jason said, pulling up another record. 3 cards, a car lease, new commercial space, all with Dana's name, but they listed your household income. Some even included your professional designation as a secondary verification. I stood up, walked to the window, and stared out at the yard. A kid next door was riding a bike in circles, humming a tune only he could hear. So much innocence. So far from this. She has no idea what she's done, I said quietly. Jason swiveled in his chair, and neither does he. I turned back. We filed today. Emergency asset protection. Before either of them realized the floor's gone. I'll package everything, Jason said. You send it to your lawyer? Already drafting the motion. You sure you want to go this far? I met his eyes. I'm not going far. I'm just not letting them walk away with my name on their mess. Jason nodded. Let's close it. And so we did. That afternoon, I drove to Harmon Fitness. From the outside, it looked exactly as expected. Sleek, polished, aspirational. The walls were lined with motivational quotes in oversized typography. Push harder, no excuses, pain is growth. Trey's face was on 2 of them. The entrance played upbeat music, the kind with synth drops and fake urgency, while early 20s gym-goers took selfies between half-hearted reps. No one looked like they were sweating, just posing. I walked in and stood at the edge of the front desk until a girl with a tablet glanced up and blinked twice. Can I help you? Trey Harmon, I said. Tell him Leonard Kessler is here. Her posture straightened. She tapped her screen, looked startled, then said, He's in his office, I'll let him know. 5 minutes later, Trey appeared. Taller than I expected, tan, capped teeth, too muscular for his own joints, the kind of man who had never been told no without a backup plan involving charm or abs. He walked toward me with a smile that had been practiced in bathroom mirrors. You must be Leonard, he said, hand extended. Dana's mentioned you. I'm sure she has, I said, not taking his hand. We need to talk, privately. His smile twitched but didn't falter. Sure, right this way. He led me to a glass-walled office, stylish, soundproof, and performative. Everything in it screamed image, not function. He gestured toward a chair, sat down across from me, and said, What can I do for you? I placed the folder on his desk. This is every financial document connecting you to Dana. Loans, leases, co-signed agreements, all using our marital assets as security. He didn't reach for it immediately. I don't understand. It's simple, I said. Dana used our marriage to back your business. You applied for loans together, listed our shared income and property, and used my professional designation to boost your credibility. He opened the folder, flipped through the pages, his face shifting slowly from confusion to realization. These are all legitimate business arrangements between me and Dana. Maybe, but the banks approved them based on assets she no longer controls. We're divorcing. Those guarantees are invalid. He stopped flipping. She said you were wealthy, he said, his voice harder now. That money wasn't an issue for you. Money was never the issue, I replied. Trust was. I stood. I'm not here to argue. I just thought you should know what's coming. The banks will be calling those loans due. Very soon. He looked up at me, jaw tightening. You're doing this to punish her. No, I said. I'm doing this to protect myself, from both of you. I turned to leave, but paused at the door. One more thing. When Dana moved out, she took some personal items, family photos, my father's watch, things money can't replace. Trey looked at me, warily. I'll see what I can do. I nodded and walked out. That evening, a courier arrived at my hotel. Inside the box, the missing photos, the watch, and a folded note I didn't bother reading. Some things don't need words. Only wait. The next morning, I checked my dashboard and saw 17 failed login attempts. Dana had tried again to access the frozen accounts, still clinging to the hope that a different device, a different browser, a different version of her name might change the outcome. At 9:42 a.m., I received a system alert. Multiple banks had initiated collection proceedings on loans bearing her co-signature. The $175,000 0-cents equipment loan? Called in. A lien had been placed on all gym assets. The commercial lease? Terminated. One of the business credit cards had gone straight to legal escalation. The machine was moving now, slow, deliberate, unstoppable, and all I had to do was not get in the way. At 10:17 a.m.ing, my phone lit up with her name. I let it ring. She tried again, then again. On the fourth call, I answered. "What have you done?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "The bank called in Trey's loans, all of them. They're seizing the equipment. They've shut down his accounts." "That's unfortunate," I said calmly. "You did this to punish me." "No," I replied. "I'm simply protecting myself from fraud." "You don't understand," she said, her voice softening with the same inflection she used to order dessert she didn't need. "This is spiraling. Trey's ruined. I can't fix this alone. Just come home. Let's talk, please." 15 years and she still thought I could be pulled back by tone alone. That guilt would override memory. That love was a lever she could tug whenever she needed a softer landing. But love without honesty is performance, and I no longer applauded. "There's nothing to work out," I said, flat as steel. "The divorce will proceed, the fraud investigation will continue, and Trey will learn an expensive lesson about due diligence." "Leonard, wait." I ended the call and blocked her number. The silence that followed wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was clean, final. That night I slept for 7 uninterrupted hours, first time in months, maybe years. 3 weeks later, we sat across from each other at a long, polished table inside a neutral gray conference room. The lighting was soft, the chairs too comfortable, the air thick with professional civility. Dana walked in wearing a designer blazer, lips painted with practiced precision, but her posture betrayed her. She looked smaller, somehow, like someone trying to hold their shape while everything around them dissolved. Her attorney was young, sharp-suited, and radiating manufactured confidence. He spoke first. "My client is willing to be reasonable regarding the division of marital assets, despite the aggressive tactics employed thus far." My attorney didn't blink. "That's good to hear, because there's been a development." She slid a folder across the table with the same casual ease one might offer a menu. "The bank has completed its internal investigation into the questioned loans and accounts." And the investigation into the questioned loans and accounts, Dana's attorney opened the file, scanned the contents, and his face lost all color within seconds. "They've determined," my attorney continued, "that multiple loan applications were submitted under the pretense of spousal support, leveraging Mr. Kessler's assets without his knowledge or consent. Dana Bowman forged his signature on at least 2 documents. One of those is the $175,000 0-cents equipment loan with Harmon Fitness." "We'll need time to review this," Dana's attorney muttered. "Of course," my attorney replied smoothly. "But you should know that the bank has already referred the matter to the district attorney for potential criminal prosecution. This meeting is a courtesy, an opportunity to resolve things before formal charges are filed." Dana's eyes locked onto mine across the table, wide and trembling. "Criminal charges, Leonard?" she said, voice cracking. "You can't be serious." "I didn't file them," I said, tone steady. "The bank did. That's what happens when you forge signatures and commit loan fraud." Her attorney leaned in, whispering frantically. She shook her head. He whispered again. This time, she didn't argue. My attorney placed another document on the table. "If Ms. Bowman is willing to sign our proposed settlement agreement today, Mr. Kessler is prepared to provide a formal statement to the bank, confirming he will not pursue personal theft or civil damages, provided full accountability is assumed and this matter is closed cleanly." "What kind of settlement?" Dana asked, barely above a whisper. "You keep your yoga studio," I said quietly. "It's profitable and it was your project from the start. You keep your car and your personal belongings, but you receive no alimony, and you assume full responsibility for the debts you incurred in my name. As for Trey Harmon, his financial problems are his own." She stared at me like she didn't recognize the man across from her. And maybe she didn't. She expected anger, or desperation, or even a desperate plea to start over. She never expected this. Consequences delivered without cruelty, justice served without vengeance. Just math. She signed the papers without another word. When we stood to leave, she reached for my arm. "I never thought you'd fight back like this," she whispered. "You always just went along with everything." "That was my choice," I said, pulling gently away. "Just like this was yours." I walked out without looking back. There was nothing behind me worth revisiting, only evidence. And it had already been filed. A month later, I moved out of the hotel and into a small craftsman house on the edge of downtown Des Moines. Nothing fancy, just wood floors that creaked in the morning, windows that let in real sunlight, and a kitchen that needed work. I wanted it that way, something I could fix with my hands, something that didn't remind me of granite countertops chosen by someone else. The realtor had raised an eyebrow when I chose it. "You sure this is the one?" she asked, standing in the overgrown yard. "Absolutely," I said. She didn't know that after years of curated spaces, of picture-perfect layouts for Dana's brand and not our life, I was ready for something honest. I spent the first 2 weeks assembling furniture, repainting trim, and pulling weeds from the backyard. Every night I slept a little deeper. No calls, no threats. No apologies disguised as negotiations, just silence, and the occasional laugh of a neighbor's kid or the bark of a dog that didn't belong to anyone I'd ever known. It was perfect. I heard through a mutual friend that Dana had moved to Colorado. Her Instagram was full of mountain views and recycled quotes about new beginnings. Trey's gym had been seized and later sold to a national chain. He moved to Miami to expand his brand. Neither of them mentioned what had happened. People rarely post about failure. One Saturday, Jason stopped by to help install new cabinets. We worked side by side like we used to when we were kids, fixing bikes in the garage. At one point, he said, "You know, you could have taken her for everything. The fraud charges alone would have buried her." I didn't answer right away. I just measured the hinge placement, marked the wood, and finally said, "What would be the point?" He nodded, didn't press. He understood. Because justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's choosing not to burn the rest of the field when the fire's already done its job. Sometimes it's letting someone walk away with their version of the story, because the truth has already been documented, and you're no longer in it. That evening, after Jason left, I sat on the back porch with a glass of bourbon. The sky was pinking into dusk, and the air smelled like grass and memory. I thought about the last 15 years, how I'd ignored signs, diminished myself, traded clarity for peace, until one day I had neither. And yet I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't want revenge, I just wanted a quiet life and my name clean. I took a sip, leaned back, and realized something I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't holding my breath. I wasn't bracing. I was free. The following Monday, I called my office and told them I'd be taking 2 weeks off. No reason given, just a break. Valerie said, "Good for you, Leonard," and for once, I believed her. I packed light. 3 shirts, a worn jacket, the fly rod my father left me, and a notebook I hadn't written in since Dana moved out. I locked up the house, loaded the truck, and pointed north. The road stretched out in front of me like a sentence without punctuation. Quiet, uninterrupted. Mine. I didn't set a destination on the GPS. I didn't make a playlist. Just drove. Somewhere around hour 4, I passed the state line into Minnesota and turned toward the cabin. My father bought it in the 80s. A modest wooden box tucked against a lake, no Wi-Fi, no cell service, no distractions. The last time I'd been there was right after his funeral. The air smelled exactly the same, like pine and water and something older than memory. I stepped inside, set down my bag, and stood in the silence. It didn't echo, it welcomed. That evening, I built a fire the way he taught me. Tight, steady, no wasted movement. I cooked beans in a pan and drank water straight from the pump. Simple things, honest things, things that didn't need approval. As the sun set, I sat on the porch and watched the sky change colors like a slow exhale. No noise, no inbox, no one asking me to sign anything, fix anything, forgive anything. Just breath, just stillness. And I realized I wasn't thinking about Dana anymore. Not really, not with anger, not even with sadness. Just with a distant curiosity, like remembering a city I once passed through. She was no longer part of the equation. The audit was closed. The file was archived, and the man who had walked into that condo on Thursday night with a full coffee mug and an empty marriage, he didn't exist anymore. I reached into my bag, pulled out the notebook, and wrote on the first page, "You can't protect what you refuse to see." Then I turned to a clean sheet and wrote, "But once you do see it, you don't need to protect. You just need to walk away." I sat there until the fire burned down and the stars took over. And in that quiet, under that sky, with no one to perform for, no one to rescue, and no one left to prove anything to, my ledger, at long last, balanced. Some people, when betrayed, scream. They break things. They demand justice, loud and immediate. But some, like Leonard, simply finish their coffee, set the cup down, and start typing. Not because they're weak, but because they've already done the work no one sees. They've already prepared for the day someone thinks they can walk out and take everything. This isn't a story about revenge. It's not about one person outsmarting another. This is the quiet story of a man who gave everything, his trust, his money, his years, and who, when it was all taken, still chose dignity over destruction. Leonard didn't burn her world down. He didn't plaster screenshots or call friends to explain his side. He didn't make noise. He made decisions. When his wife tried to erase him, he didn't chase, he traced. He followed the paper trail. He documented, filed, and protected what mattered. Not just the money, but his name, his worth, his sense of self. Because what Dana never understood was that Leonard wasn't just a man with spreadsheets. He was a man who noticed things, quietly, completely, and in silence. He built an exit she never saw coming. The real victory wasn't freezing the accounts or exposing the fraud. The real victory was standing in a courthouse, looking at the woman who once called him her rock, and not needing to say anything at all, because the truth had already been said, in signatures she forged, in dollars she moved, in lies she believed would go unnoticed. And yet, he didn't ruin her. He could have, but he didn't. That's the part that stays with you. Leonard chose peace over punishment. He chose a modest home over legal fireworks. He chose to go fishing, to rebuild cabinets, to sit under the stars and write truths in a notebook no one would read but him, because sometimes justice isn't about taking someone down. It's about walking away. Clean. And if you've ever loved someone who tried to rewrite the ending without you, if you've ever stayed quiet while someone else spun the narrative, maybe this story is yours too. Maybe you know what it's like to feel erased, replaced, discarded. But hear this, you are not gone. You are still here. And the moment you stop explaining, stop defending, and simply step into your next chapter, that's the moment you take your power back. Leonard didn't need applause. He didn't need validation. He just needed a place where no one confused his silence for weakness. And now, maybe, so do you. If this story reached something inside you, if it made you pause and exhale, please consider sharing it. Not for views, not for clicks, but because someone out there is sitting in silence right now, not knowing what comes next. Maybe they need to hear that you don't have to destroy someone to heal. You just have to protect yourself, step by step, quietly, intentionally. And when the time comes, you walk away with your head held high. Leave a comment, share your thoughts, or just leave it in the chat to let us know you've been there, that you're walking your own road now. And if you ever feel like your story doesn't matter because it's not dramatic or loud enough, remember Leonard. Some of the strongest endings are written in lowercase, and some ledgers are best closed in peace.